Yes, Geordies, welcome back to another episode. The first thing I want to say, as always, I hope everyone's well. The second thing I want to say, I hope you've had a good weekend. It's approximately 6:30 Monday morning, and guess what? I've already been to the gym. I've got a busy day ahead, so I thought I'll get up early, go to the gym, record a video, because you guys are now my priority. And we've got an interesting video coming up because a lot went on, especially in the news over the weekend. So I want to talk about Bayern Munich's president because, in my opinion, some things are just better left unsaid. And then I want to talk about what Eddie Howe looks for in a player. And then we're going to do a scout report on Andrey Santos, comparing him to Joelinton, Bruno and Tonali to see if he would be a good fit at St. James's Park. But let's get started because we've all seen the news. The Bayern Munich president come out and spoke about Nick Woltemade and also just Newcastle in general, saying they wouldn't be able to spend this money without the Saudi ownership. And I just think, you know what? Have a little bit of dignity. Come on, you're a president of one of the biggest football clubs in the world. Have a little bit of class. What Newcastle do and what Newcastle spend have got absolutely nothing to do with Bayern Munich, even though they bid for Nick. I'm going to call him Nick because I keep on messing up his name. But I just think he's not a Bayern Munich player. He's not available for Bayern Munich to sign, so he's got no reason to comment on the situation. What Newcastle spend and decide to spend on a player, it's got absolutely nothing to do with him. And I think sometimes in life, some things are just better left unsaid. If it's got nothing to do with you, don't get involved in the business. Yes, you bid for Nick Woltemade before Newcastle United did. If you didn't want to go up to what Stuttgart valued him at, that's your decision. And Newcastle United did, and that's their decision. So some things in life, you've just got to sit back and say, well, he's not our player, so I'm not going to comment on him. And I think the lack of respect he showed Nicholas Jackson, my God, if I'm Nicholas Jackson, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not even wanted at this football club. But I'm not going to read it all out because I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if he's talking about monopoly money, where's he been living? Has he been living under a rock? All I taste is bitterness, and I can taste his bitterness from you because the fact is, 7 Premier League clubs spent more than Newcastle United this summer. Another fact, because of FFP and PSR, which have been well documented, we've had to sell Elliot Anderson and Yakuba Mintner, in which we didn't want to do. Aside from that, we had not signed a senior player since Lewis Hall, which was 2022-23 season for our squad. This is the first window we've really been able to spend freely after balancing the books. We cannot do what Man City did. We cannot do what Chelsea did. And being a president of a football club, he should be the first to know that. And in fact, if you want to speak about facts and monopoly money, in that time, without listing every single transfer, Bayern Munich have spent 328 million. And again, if you want to speak about facts, Bayern Munich have pretty much ran the Bundesliga. Just think about all the German players they've signed on a free. You cannot tell me they don't tell their agents and that player to run down their contracts. It has been going on for years. You can even go back to when Robert Lewandowski signed from Borussia Dortmund on a free. That is because Bayern said and told him to run down his contract because they were willing to sign him. That's all I've got to say on the situation. But I just think sometimes in life, you're in a position of greatness. You're in a position of strength and you've got a beautiful opportunity and you're sitting at the top of the table in a high football club. Have a bit of dignity. Anyways, moving on from that, because what I want to talk about is what Eddie Howe looks for in a player. And I think it's all mentally. I think he looks for good characters over ability. And it was actually said when he was at Bournemouth, one of their analysts came out and said Eddie Howe did more work than a scout on a player. He wanted to know if he could work with them on a day-to-day basis. So are they a good character? Even Eddie Howe has come out and said that he wants to build a culture that gives you the optimum chance of success, which I absolutely believe in. So what he's implying there is selecting players that fit the dressing room and the training ground ethos. And we've seen that across his signings since he's arrived at Newcastle United. So he prioritizes players who can adapt to their tactical demands and embrace the culture. So if a player comes out and says he doesn't want to live in Newcastle, forget about it. If you're not going to embrace the Geordie culture, forget about it. Now, I've openly spoken about the opportunity of signing Andrey Santos, and we all know Chelsea love a pound note. They can make a profit. They will sell a player. So could we look at the opportunity of signing him on loan in January? Now, just quickly, before we get on Andrey Santos, I wanted to speak about what I look for in a player, and I think what Eddie Howe looks for, because in general, there's more than this. but you get confidence players or you get motivation players. And let's break it down, because if you look at your confidence players, these are the players that thrive when you feel happy. Now, I always say the best managers, the best scouts, the best sporting directors are good man managers. They understand the character of the person and they can manage them individually. You look at Eddie Howe, he comes across as me. He's the type of bloke that manages different players depending on their characteristics. So I actually look at Eddie Howe and think he's got a good judge of character. He knows how to manage players to get the best out of them. Now, when I look across Newcastle United squad, I sit there and I think we don't really have any confidence players. What do I mean by confidence players? These are players when they thrive, when they feel happy, loved, wanted, and not when they're being criticized. These are the players that have exceptional belief in their own ability, so a bit egotistical, but they do lose rhythm and self-belief. So when things don't go right on a football pitch, they will get their head down. You will notice their body language change and be a little bit more negative. So when you're approaching these types of players, you have to keep them happy. They want to feel the main man. They want to feel loved in a culture. It sounds childish, but it's true. And the examples I've given here is Jadon Sancho, João Felix, Marcus Rashford. These are all confidence players. They thrive and do their best performances when they feel wanted, when they feel loved. As soon as you give them a little bit of negative feedback, they don't know how to cope. Now, I've got my reasons behind this. I'm not putting it down to their characters. I think it's the way they've been brought through academies, but that's for a different story. But I want to make this point clear. When I'm doing a little bit of scouting on youth football, what I look for is their confidence. I love it. And this sounds a bit harsh, but when I'm scouting a specific player rather than just the team in general, I kind of hope that the game's not going their way, because I want to see their reaction. I want to see how they cope with a bit of adversity. You can step on the football pitch and you can try to do the right thing sometimes, but sometimes it's just not your day. And I love finding a player when it's not his day, because I love to find his attitude. Does he still work hard off the ball? Is he letting it get to him? Is his head going down? Is he stopped trying the right things? I look for a player when, yes, I want them to make a little bit of a mistake, because I want to see if he tries that again. Because he tried the right thing, it didn't come off. Will he continue to do it? Because I'm a firm believer, if you continue to do the right things, even in bad form, you will pick up form and eventually it will click for you. And I think that's a type of character Eddie Howe wants in his squad. So when I'm watching players and they make a mistake, I'm like, yes, I like that, because now I can really identify what your character's like. Because I'm not going to lie, I've seen loads of players with unbelievable ability that let the game pass them by too much, because they're their own biggest self-critic. And if they're not feeling loved around the stadium and by their manager, they don't know how to face that adversity. And I think it's because in academies we'll put players on pedestals that are unrealistic, like Jadon Sancho. When he was coming through the academy, he could do no wrong. And I kind of feel like clubs are sitting there thinking, we don't want to upset that player because we don't want him to leave on a free. So they generally try to big up players so much that they feel loved and welcome in academies. And when they reach senior football and it doesn't go their way, they struggle to cope mentally. That's just my say on it. And I think this is becoming more and more in academies, because clubs see academy players as assets, is 100% profit. So they see them as money makers. So they don't want to upset them and have them leaving for another club. So they'll do everything in their power for them to sign a contract. Anyways, that's for a different story. My point is, I actually think Eddie Howe looks for motivational players, players who are self-driven, don't look for validation in managers or from their teammates. They've got this deep-rooted resilience and ability to motivate themselves and everybody else around them. So these types of players use adversity as fuel. They have that steady progression in their careers over time. And you look at Dan Burn, you look at Tino, you look at Jacob Murphy, you look at Tonali, you look at Bruno. Our squad is filled with those players. The closest player in our squad to a confidence player is probably Anthony Gordon. And I think we're seeing that at Everton. When things weren't going right, he was letting it get down to him. He was shaking his head. But since he's come at Newcastle United, Eddie Howe's changed his mindset. Even when things don't go his way, he misses an opportunity, you can still see him grafting off the ball. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And I kind of see a little bit that in Andrey Santos, because he's had that bad experience at Nottingham Forest and then he thrived and embraced the culture in France. So I thought we'd start by looking at his early career. He debuted for Vasco da Gama at 16, becoming their youngest ever goal scorer at the club. Now, sometimes I believe that when a youth product is coming through into senior football, it's all about timing. The year before Andrey Santos broke through, Vasco actually got relegated. So it gave him the perfect platform to learn the game in the second division of Brazilian football. Now, he absolutely excelled at Vasco da Gama, and that's why Chelsea bought him for 20 million. When you get young players who are moving into a different country and you're looking to loan them out, you want to loan them out into a culture that is already set. And at that time, Nottingham Forest were very, very sporadic. They were battling relegation. They were bringing in 20 players, selling 20 players every transfer window. And I just don't think they had a culture that he could embrace into. So it didn't really go well in Nottingham Forest, and that's a brutal honesty of it. But then he got loaned to Strasbourg, which is obviously Chelsea's sister club, and he was absolutely electric last season. So let's look at some statistics. He won the GFFN League or Young Player of the Season. He scored 10 league goals, provided 3 assists. He led the league in tackles with 110. He also recorded 32 interceptions, 188 ball recoveries, which was the 4th in the whole league, and 64 clearances. On top of that, in possession, he ranked 2nd for progressive passes, 2nd for passes in the final third, and he also provided 27 key passes. On top of that, he also had 1,015 ball carries throughout the season and 29 progressive carries. So what I'm trying to say, by those statistics alone, now I know statistics don't correlate directly to the Premier League and the two completely different leagues, but looking at those statistics, he's good off the ball, he works hard, that's proven in his ball recoveries and his tackles and his interceptions and his clearances. He's good in possession, ranked 2nd for progressive passes, so he's got that vision, passes in the final third, which is excellent. Everything Newcastle United need, because we move the ball quick. We don't dwell on the ball. We're not a team that wants to dictate play and slow down tempo. We're a fast-moving team. We want to counter-attack and be brave, bold in transition moments. And when you've got a player that is quality in possession, has vision, can create opportunity and progressive in his passes, that will just light up Anthony Elanga and Anthony Gordon and even Johan Wissa, who's very sharp off the mark, eyes up. So let's break him down. I want to tell you what I like about Andrey Santos and where I think he needs to improve on. So his positional play in a double pivot or a midfield 3, acting as a box-to-box midfielder, because he's capable of contributing at all thirds of the pitch. He combines defensive grit with offensive ability. He ranked 2nd for most touches at Strasbourg last season. So that just highlights his involvement in the game. He's comfortable receiving the ball, he wants to get on the ball, and he wants to be the main man, which I like a lot. And because he's really progressive in his play, he's a big transitional threat, and that's what we look for in a player. He's a strong ball carrier, but he often initiates transitions with line-breaking passes or dribbles, as we've seen in these statistics. Defensively, we've seen that in these statistics as well. He ranked 1st for the whole league for most tackles, and the reason behind that, I think, is because he actually began his career as a centre-back, so he's already got that defensive awareness and anticipation in his game, so he's just brought that into his midfield. So he's an efficient tackler both on the ground and in the air. He was actually winning 77% of his aerial duels. And what we're going to look at very shortly, he covers the ground very quickly thanks to his long strides and stamina, ideal for pressing and recovery phases. Now in possession, he's a classy technician. When he's operating deep, he keeps it simple with pressure evading passes. Now by doing this allows more creative teammates to flourish. Now one of his areas that he's most improved on is receiving under pressure, and that's shown in his statistics. He's got an 89% dribbling success rate, and he averages 1.38 successful dribbles per 90. Now I've highlighted 3 areas for improvement. First one, positional awareness. Sometimes he gets a little bit too excited and evacuates his position too early, so he drifts too high in possession phases and he leaves gaps in behind. Sometimes he just needs to understand his moments on when to support attacks and when not to, and I'm sure that's something you can just coach into him. Secondly, tempo control, learning how to dictate rhythm and picking the right times to slow the game down or quicken it up. He always plays with a bit of urgency, which isn't bad, but sometimes a little bit more composure, maybe when you're under the ropes or just need to take the sting out of the game. And then thirdly, although I love his stamina, he can work hard off the ball. He's covers a lot of ground. He's got unbelievable stamina, but his first step quickness could be a little bit sharper. His acceleration, the explosive on his first step isn't the best. And this is why sometimes he struggles when he receives under intense pressure. Although he's got the ability to move around players, sometimes he doesn't have that physicality to move around players. So maybe a couple of training sessions with Anthony Elanga might actually sharpen up his quickness. Now, what does Eddie Howe look for in a midfielder? We want those multi-facet midfielders. We want those midfielders that cover the ground tirelessly. We want midfielders that are comfortable in possession, but more importantly, comfortable out of possession. And that's what we're seeing with Andrey Santos. But I want to show you exactly what I mean about him covering the ground, because last season he covered the most total kilometers in the season amongst all legal players. So when I'm talking about his work rate off the ball, covering the ground, supporting wide areas, recovering the ball or pressing highly, he's got it all in his locker. Now, what else did Newcastle United like to do? We like to overturn the ball as early as possible. But also, when we overturn the ball, we want our players to retain possession because that allows us to break quickly. There was only 3 players in the league that retained possession from opponents more than Andrey Santos last season, and he was one of 5 players to retain possession from an opponent and start a move that ended with a shot 13 or more times. So not only is he winning the ball back, he's winning the ball back and then feeding his teammates in advanced areas. That is exactly how Newcastle and when Newcastle United are at their most dangerous. So when it comes to what he wants to do on the pitch and his profile, it actually fits what Eddie Howe was looking for. So we've spoken about his defensive qualities. He excels off the ball, winning the ball back. He's absolutely excellent at it. But on top of that, only Diego Moreira was the only Strasbourg player to create more open play chances than Andrey Santos last season. So not only does he give you that defensive grit, he also allows you to be creative as well. Again, I'm not sitting here saying he's the best thing since sliced bread, and I'm not sitting here saying it would definitely work out, and I'm not sitting here saying he's the best midfielder in the world, because he's not. What I'm saying is his tactical profile and what he likes to do on a football pitch is what Eddie Howe looks for in a midfielder. Now, he can also develop Andrey Santos into a better player because there definitely is some rooms for improvement. But if we move it on and look at his progressiveness in possession, the diagram there just shows how devastating he can be as a progressive destroyer. One thing I will say about him, he's good at carrying the ball. He's not the best, but he's excellent at passing the ball. His accuracy, he's crisp, he's sharp, and his vision is excellent. Now, at Strasbourg, he spent most of his time in a double pivot. He had 2 number 10s playing ahead of him because they play the same formation as Man United, 3-4-2-1. So his responsibilities was not to be very creative. His responsibilities were to win the ball back and then lend it off to the players in advanced positions. So by keeping that in mind, if you look at the green arrows on the diagram, they're all successful progressive passes. And what I like about that, he provides a good amount of box penetration. So his first thought is, can I release players in advanced areas? So not to sound like a know-it-all, but if you're asking us, or if you're wondering what a progressive pass is, progressive pass is different to a forward pass. A forward pass can just be when you pass a ball into a midfielder, or when you pass a ball 5 yards into a more advanced player. A progressive pass is when you put your team 25% up the pitch. That's the difference between a progressive pass and a forward pass. So Andrey Santos does actually provide an excellent combination of defensive grit and ball progression. Now, one thing I want to say, I love this diagram because he is an island of his own. Now, I know it's difficult to see, so I will circle him on the map. But when it comes to goals and tackles combined, he's literally in an island of his own. He's like an outliner when it comes to Liga. In fact, that's actually Europe's top 5 leagues this season. So tackles won along the bottom, goals along the top. And just below him in terms of tackles won is Lamine Camara. And I'm not surprised to see that. If he could add a little bit more goals to his game, he could be more like Andrey Santos. Now, based off what I've watched and the statistics alone, I actually would be comfortable him playing any role in our midfield. Now, I do think he would play the Tonali and Joelinton role a little bit better than the Bruno role. But look, we're kind of be complaining because he created the second most open play chances at Strasbourg last season. But when you look at the Tonali role, he's deployed as a number 6 with 2 number 8s either side of him. His role is winning the ball back, ground coverage, intensity, recycling possession, quickly supports wide overload. Now, I actually think Santos can replicate his ball winning ability and intensity ability, as well as his technical ability. Now, I do think he needs to understand when to slow the pace down and when to quicken it up and when to dictate tempo and when to move it forwards. But that's something that can easily be coached into him. So I actually do think he could play that number 6 role with 2 number 8s. But he's also got those box-to-box qualities. He can cover a large proportion of the ground. So when you think of the Bruno role, he's a right-sided number 8 offering chance creation, and I actually think Bruno's a little bit underrated when it comes to shot creating actions, ball retention, and defensive coverage and pressing triggers. Now, although I do think he could play this role, it might not complement his overall skill set, because I actually think defensively that's his biggest attribute. And when you think of the Joelinton role, obviously that left-sided number 8, he wins duels for sheer physicality and timing. He breaks up play and he initiates transition actions and drives a team forward with power. Now, I actually do think Andrey Santos could replicate his ball-winning ability, and we've seen that at Strasbourg. But one thing I will say about Andrey Santos and Joelinton, Andrey Santos is a little bit more of a lighter version, but a more technical version than Joelinton. So he will get on the ball more. He will have a little bit more creativity and vision from all areas of the pitch. And although he provides that defensive solidity, he's not as physical and aggressive as Joelinton. So just to finish it off, we may as well have a look at them from a statistical point of view. Now, I understand before anybody says it in the comments, you cannot correlate statistics from Liga to the Premier League. But I will say a lot of players have come from Liga and actually done well in the Premier League, especially defensive players. So as you can see, when it comes to Bruno does create a lot more shot creating actions per 90. Now that could be down to the instructions of the manager. But when it comes to that defensive solidity, as you can see, Andrey Santos is very well rounded. But as you can see, he gets involved in play just as much as Bruno Guimaraes. So that ability to receive the ball, always be an option for the man in possession, will always be there. And you could say the same about Sandro Tonali. As you can see, he's slightly less, but it's not far off when it comes to touches per 90. But again, when it comes to that defensive coverage, Andrey Santos is excellent. But as you can see, Sandro Tonali is creating a lot more shot creating actions per 90. And again, I think that's down to the instructions of the manager, because we often see Sandro Tonali rotating with Bruno or Joelinton at times. So I think if Andrey Santos came in and played that Sandro Tonali role, Eddie Howe would give him that freedom to be more expressive. But again, it's all about creating those understandings on the pitch. If Joelinton sees somebody moving forward, can he cover for them? And that's what I'm talking about, building those partnerships on the pitch. And lastly, we may as well compare him to Joelinton. And again, a lot more defensive coverage than what Joelinton did last season. But as you can see from the statistics, Andrey Santos gets involved in play a lot more because he's averaging a lot more touches. Now, when it comes to progressive carries, I often say Joelinton's disrespected. No, that's probably the wrong word, but underrated. When it comes to moving the ball with the ball at his feet, he does do those little 10-yard strides when it comes to dribbling. Now, when it comes to Andrey Santos, he's more of a ball player. He wants to release players from all areas of the pitch. Now, it helps him because he was playing with Emmanuel Omega last season, who was the quickest player in Liga last season. But when you've got Anthony Elanga, you can use him in a similar way. Look, but I want to hear from you guys, because it's not all about me. I can present you all the information, but it's up to you to decide. Now, if I remember correctly, I'm sure we were linked to Andrey Santos before he even went to Chelsea. So this is somebody that we have scouted, wanted before. And we've seen that with João Pedro. We've seen that with Hugo Ekitike, players we identified before they came stars. Now, I just wish we took that opportunity to sign them. But I want to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments in the below about Bayern Munich's president, but more importantly about Andrey Santos. Because I think if we can get a sneaky loan deal in January, it's just going to give us more depth and quality in those midfield positions. But as always, guys, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, away the lads.